Imagine this. One rainy Tuesday, stuck in traffic, I called my husband. He thought he hung up, but he didn't. What I heard next shattered my entire world. A conversation between him and my pregnant best friend, plotting to take my family's inheritance and leave me with absolutely nothing. The betrayal, the shock, the sheer anger, it still takes my breath away. It was a typical, rainy Seattle evening, traffic crawling. I called Richard, my husband of 15 years, just to tell him I was heading home early. He picked up with that rushed, slightly breathless tone, claiming to be in a crucial business negotiation. He said he loved me. He promised he was wrapping up. Then, he thought he hung up. But he didn't. The Bluetooth in my car, usually such a convenience, became the instrument of my unraveling. The line stayed open. There was a second of silence. Then the static cleared, and his voice came through the speakers. Not the gentle, loving voice he used with me, but a lower, arrogant one. "God, she is so suffocating," Richard said. The clarity was terrifying. It sounded like he was sitting right beside me. My hands gripped the leather steering wheel. The call timer was still ticking. I almost shouted, "Richard, I'm still here." But then, another voice answered him. A woman's voice. One I knew better than my own sister's. "You better not." She laughed, a throaty, familiar sound. "I don't want my son confused about who his real family is." It was Monica, my best friend, the woman I'd known since college, who sat at my kitchen island every Sunday, sipping herbal tea. I didn't scream. I couldn't even breathe. I just merged into the slow lane, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "Don't worry, babe," Richard cooed. "Laura is clueless. She lives in that fairy tale world her daddy built for her. She thinks I'm grinding away at the office to build our future." "I'm tired of waiting, Richard," Monica whined. "Look at me. I'm 6 months pregnant. I can't keep hiding inside those hideous oversized sweaters Laura buys me. It's humiliating, pretending this baby is some accident from a guy who ran off." Richard's voice turned cold, calculating. "Just wait. Just wait until her father's check clears. You know the trust fund distribution is next month. 5 million. Monica, that's our ticket. Once that money hits our joint account, I transfer it to the offshore shell, serve her the divorce papers, and we are gone. We'll take the baby and leave her with nothing but her empty house and her dried-up womb." The blood drained from my face. The world outside my windshield blurred. Dried-up womb. That was the cruelest insult he could possibly throw. He knew how many rounds of IVF we'd tried. He knew how many nights I'd cried in his arms after another miscarriage. He knew I blamed myself. "She's too old to give me a son anyway," Richard continued, twisting the knife. "She's barren. Monica, you're giving me the legacy she never could." Then came a sound that nearly caused me to drive off the bridge. A rhythmic swooshing. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. "Listen to that," Monica cooed. "That's your son's heartbeat. Strong, unlike hers." They were at the OB/GYN appointment. The appointment Monica had told me she was going to alone, because she was so scared and lonely. She'd even asked me for money for the copay yesterday. I was shaking so violently the car swerved slightly, earning a honk from a passing truck. I pulled over onto the wet shoulder of the highway, my hazard lights blinking in the gloom. I sat there, paralyzed, listening to my husband and my best friend kiss. I heard the wet smacking sound of their lips, the murmur of affection I hadn't received in years. "I love you," Richard whispered to her. "We just have to play the game a little longer. Use her money to pay for the birth. Let her buy the crib. Let her set up the nursery. And then we vanish." I stayed at the dashboard. The call timer hit 4 minutes and 12 seconds. Then finally, the line went dead. I sat in the silence of my car, the rain drumming against the roof like a funeral march. My entire life, my marriage, my friendship, my future, had just been dismantled in 4 minutes. They weren't just cheating. They were planning to steal my family's inheritance. They were mocking my infertility. They were going to let me build a nursery for a baby they planned to steal away. I looked at my phone. A text popped up from Richard. "Sorry, honey. Meeting ran late. Picking up dinner. Love you." And right below it, a text from Monica. Auntie Laura. Baby is kicking so much today. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. I let out a scream that tore up my throat, a primal sound of pure agony. But as the scream faded, something else settled in my chest. It wasn't just sadness. It was a cold, hard block of ice. They thought I was the clueless, barren wife. They thought I was just a walking checkbook. I wiped my face. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes were red, but they were sharp. Okay, I whispered to the empty car. You want to play a game? Let's play. By the way, if you're still with me on this wild ride, make sure to hit that subscribe button. You don't want to miss what happens next. And trust me, there are more unbelievable stories coming your way. Now, let me tell you about the ghost that haunted me on that drive home. I didn't start the engine immediately. My body still trembled, a physical rejection of the trauma I'd just absorbed. I leaned back, closing my eyes. Instantly, memories flooded back, not as warm nostalgia, but as sharp, jagged shards of glass. I thought about Richard. 7 years ago, when we met, he was charming, handsome, but utterly broken, literally and financially. His tech startup had just declared bankruptcy. I was the one who paid off his credit card debt so he could qualify for a car loan. I was the one who introduced him to my father, Arthur, a man who built his empire on steel and logistics. Dad had been skeptical. He has shifting eyes. Laura, he'd warned. He looks at your purse, not your face. But I was 35 then. Hearing my biological clock tick like a time bomb. I wanted love. I wanted a family. I defended Richard. I told my parents he had vision. I paid for our wedding. I bought the house we lived in. I even put him on the deed because I wanted us to be equals. Equals. I laughed bitterly in the dark car. We were never equals. I was the host. He was the parasite. And then there was Monica. The betrayal from her cut deeper than Richard's. You expect men to be stupid sometimes. But your best friend? Monica was 10 years younger than me. I met her when she was an intern at the charity foundation I managed. One day, she came to me crying. Her mother needed surgery, and she couldn't afford it. I wrote the check, a personal check, for $15,000. I never asked for it back. When she lost her apartment, I let her stay in my guest house for 6 months, rent-free. When she cried about being single and lonely, I held her hand. And when she told me she was pregnant 3 months ago, sobbing that the father was a one-night stand who'd blocked her number, I was the one who wiped her tears. I remember taking her shopping just last week. We were at a high-end baby boutique. She'd picked out a crib, a ridiculously expensive, hand-carved oak crib. It's too much, Laura, she'd said, giving me those wide, innocent, doe eyes. I can't afford this nonsense. I'd replied, handing my credit card to the cashier. I'm going to be the honorary auntie. I want this baby to have the best. Richard had been standing there with us, looking at the crib. I'd thought his soft expression was affection for me and my generosity. Now I knew he was looking at the crib for his son. They were shopping for their family, on my dime, right in front of my face. They must have laughed about it in bed later. Look at how stupid she is. She's buying furniture for the baby that will replace her. The realization made bile rise in my throat. Every kindness I had shown them was now a weapon they used against me. My infertility, my greatest sorrow, was their punchline. I looked at my phone again. I needed to delete the call log. I couldn't let Richard know I had called. If he saw a 4-minute call that he'd missed, he would know I heard everything. He would cover his tracks. He would hide the money better. He might even become dangerous. I took a deep breath, forcing air into lungs that felt too tight. I had to go home. I had to walk into that house, look my husband in the eye, and not claw his face off. I had to be the Laura they thought I was, sweet, oblivious, naive Laura. But the Laura sitting in the car on the side of the I-5 was dead. The woman who turned the key in the ignition was someone else entirely. She was the daughter of Arthur Reynolds, a man who chewed up competitors for breakfast. I put the car in drive. The rain was letting up, leaving the city lights reflecting on the wet asphalt like spilled oil. I was going home to a crime scene. But this time, I wasn't going to be the victim. I was going to be the detective, the judge, and the executioner. Pulling into the driveway of our colonial-style home usually brought me a sense of peace. The manicured hedges, the warm yellow light spilling from the porch. It was the sanctuary I'd built. Tonight, it looked like a stage set for a horror movie. I checked my face in the vanity mirror one last time. I applied a fresh coat of lipstick to hide the fact that I'd chewed my lip until it bled. I practiced my smile. It felt stiff, like a mask made of clay that hadn't quite dried, but it would have to do. I unlocked the front door, and the smell hit me instantly. Garlic, rosemary, and searing steak. Richard was cooking. This was part of his routine. Whenever he felt guilty, or whenever he was about to ask for a large sum of money, he played the role of the Michelin star chef. "Honey, is that you?" His voice drifted from the kitchen, warm and inviting. It was a voice I used to fall asleep to. Now it sounded like the hiss of a snake. "I'm home," I called out, aiming for cheerful, but landing somewhere near exhausted. That was okay. I could play the tired wife card. Richard walked into the hallway, wiping his hands on a dish towel. He was wearing the cashmere sweater I bought him for Christmas. He looked handsome. Damn him. He looked so handsome with his salt and pepper hair and that boyish grin. He walked up to me and wrapped his arms around my waist. I had to command every muscle in my body not to flinch. I had to force myself to stay limp, to let him pull me close. "You're late," he murmured, kissing my forehead. I was getting worried. "How is your mom?" "She's fine," I lied. "Just talkative. You know how she gets about her garden." He pulled back slightly, looking into my eyes. For a second, panic flared in my chest. Does he know? Can he see it? "You look pale, Laura. Are you okay?" "Just a migraine," I said, rubbing my temples. The traffic was a nightmare. The lights were blurring together. "Poor thing," he cooed. He kissed my cheek, and that's when I smelled it. Beneath the scent of garlic and his expensive cologne, there was a faint, lingering note of vanilla and coconut. It was her perfume. Monica's cheap drugstore body spray that she loved because it smelled like vacation. He had been with her recently, maybe right before he came home to cook my steak. He hadn't even bothered to shower. He was so arrogant, so sure of my blindness, that he walked into our home carrying the scent of his mistress on his skin. I pulled away gently. "I think I need to lie down for a bit. The smell of the food, it's a little strong for my head right now." "Of course," he said, the picture of concern. "Go rest. I'll keep your dinner warm. Do you want some aspirin?" "No, just sleep," I said. I walked up the stairs, feeling his eyes on my back. My legs felt like lead. I entered our bedroom, the room where we had tried to conceive a child for 5 years, and locked the door. I walked straight to the bathroom and dry heaved over the sink. Nothing came up, just bitter bile. I turned on the faucet to mask any noise. I splashed cold water on my face, watching the droplets run down like tears I refused to shed. I needed to know more. The phone call was the smoking gun. But in a divorce involving millions of dollars, specifically inherited wealth, I needed a nuclear arsenal. I needed to know exactly where he was planning to move the money. He mentioned an offshore shell. I dried my face and walked back into the bedroom. Richard's iPad was on the nightstand. He usually took it everywhere, but he must have left it charging. My heart rate spiked. I knew his passcode. It was his birthday. Narcissist. I unplugged it and sat on the edge of the bed, my ears straining for the sound of footsteps on the stairs. I opened his messages. He had deleted the thread with Monica. He was careful about that, but he hadn't cleared his browser history. I clicked on Safari. My fingers trembled as I scrolled. Non-extradition countries. Real estate in Belize. How to hide assets in a trust divorce. Paternity test accuracy timeline. And then, the most chilling search of all, timestamped 3 days ago. Average life expectancy of women with high blood pressure. I froze. I didn't have high blood pressure, but my mother did. Was he planning to wait for my parents to die, too? Or was he hoping the stress of the divorce would kill me? I heard the heavy thud of a footstep on the stairs. I quickly locked the iPad, plugged it back in, and dove under the duvet, pulling it up to my chin. I feigned sleep, my breathing shallow and even. The doorknob turned. "Laura," he whispered. I didn't move. He stood there for a moment, watching me. I could feel his presence like a dark shadow in the room. Then I heard the soft ping of a notification from the iPad. He walked over, picked it up, and I heard the tapping of his fingers. "Sleep tight, cash cow," he whispered so low, I almost didn't hear it. He closed the door. I opened my eyes in the darkness. He thought I was sleeping. He thought I was the cash cow. But he forgot that cows have horns, and when they are cornered, they stampede. The next morning, the doorbell rang at 10 a.m. sharp. It was Monica. I had barely slept. My eyes felt gritty, but I had applied extra concealer and put on a crisp white blouse. Armor. I needed armor. Richard had left for work early, which probably meant he was looking at real estate listings or meeting with a shady accountant. So, it was just me and the woman carrying my husband's child. I opened the door and there she was. She looked glowing. I had to admit, pregnancy suited her. She was wearing one of the oversized cashmere sweaters I had bought her 2 weeks ago. It cost $400. She had spilled coffee on it already. "Laura," she squealed, leaning in for a hug. I held my breath as her body pressed against mine. I could feel the hard bump of her stomach against my waist. It took every ounce of willpower not to shove her backward down the porch steps. "Hi, Monica," I said, my voice tight. "Come on in." We sat in the sunroom. I poured her a cup of decaf herbal tea, the expensive blend she liked. "So," she said, blowing on the steam. "How are you? Richard texted me that you had a migraine last night. You poor thing. You really need to take better care of yourself. At your age, stress can be dangerous." At your age. The first dig of the morning. "I'm fine," I said, taking a sip of my black coffee. "Just a lot on my mind. Richard and I were talking about the future." I saw her hand pause midair. "Oh, what about the future?" "Well," I lied smoothly. "I was thinking about the inheritance coming in from my dad. It's a lot of money to manage. I was telling Richard, maybe we should just donate a huge chunk of it. Start a new foundation. You know, give back to the world instead of hoarding it." Monica choked on her tea. She coughed violently, setting the cup down with a clatter. "Donate it. All of it." "Not all of it," I smiled, a shark-like baring of teeth. "But most. Richard and I don't have children. We don't have anyone to leave a legacy to. Why keep millions sitting around when we live so simply?" Panic flitted across her eyes. She rubbed her belly unconsciously, a protective gesture. "But Laura, surely you want to keep some for security? Or what if you guys try for a baby again? Surrogacy is expensive." "No," I sighed, looking out the window at the garden. "Richard thinks I'm too old. And honestly, maybe he's right. Maybe some bloodlines just aren't meant to continue. Besides, karma has a way of working things out. If you do good, you get good. If you lie and cheat, well, you end up with nothing." I turned my gaze back to her, locking eyes. For a second, the air in the room went still. I saw a flicker of genuine fear in her pupils. Did she know I knew? Then she forced a laugh, high and brittle. "Wow, that's heavy for a Wednesday morning. You're so noble, Laura. But Richard, does he agree? He works so hard. He deserves to enjoy that money." "Richard agrees with whatever I say," I said coldly. "He knows who holds the purse strings." Monica shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Well, speaking of babies, the little guy is kicking up a storm today." She lifted her sweater slightly, showing off the curve of her belly. "Do you want to feel?" It was a power move, a cruel, twisted power move to remind me of what she had, and I didn't. She thought it would make me cry. She thought I would crumble. I stared at her exposed skin. That was my husband's child, half of his DNA knitting together inside her. "No thanks," I said flatly. "I'm not really a baby person anymore. I think I'm over it." Monica looked stunned. I was supposed to be the weeping, desperate, infertile woman. My indifference threw her off script. "Oh, okay." She pulled her sweater down. "Well, I just wanted to remind you about the baby shower next month. I know it's a lot to ask, but since you offered to host, I'm still hosting," I interrupted. "In fact, I want to make it bigger. Let's invite everyone. Richard's colleagues, my family, all our mutual friends. Let's make it a massive celebration." Monica's eyes lit up. Greed. She loved being the center of attention, especially on my dime. Really? You'd do that? Absolutely, I said. I want to give you a party that no one will ever forget. She beamed, oblivious to the threat hidden in my promise. You're the best friend ever, Laura. Seriously, I don't know what I'd do without you. You'd be broken and alone, I thought. I have to run. I stood up abruptly. I have a meeting with my financial advisor to discuss the donation. Monica stood up so fast she nearly knocked the chair over. Right. Yes. Don't do anything rash, though, okay? Talk to Richard first. I always talk to Richard, I said, walking her to the door. As she walked to her beat-up Honda Civic, which I knew Richard was planning to replace with a Range Rover using my money, I pulled out my phone. I dialed the number for the best forensic accountant in the state. This is Laura Reynolds, I said when the receptionist answered. I need to book an urgent consultation. I suspect high-level marital fraud and asset dissipation, and I need a team who can work quietly. The game was on. Monica wanted a party. I was going to give her a spectacle. The forensic accountant, a man named Mr. Henderson with glasses thick enough to see into the future, had given me a checklist. Get the hard drive. Get the tax returns. Check the credit reports. 2 days after Monica's visit, Richard went on an overnight business trip to Portland. I knew he wasn't in Portland. The Find My iPhone feature he thought he had disabled on our shared family cloud account showed his iPad, which he took with him, pinging at a luxury resort 2 hours north. And guess whose phone was pinging at the same location? Monica's. I didn't cry this time. I felt a cold, clinical precision taking over. I waited until I was sure they were settled in. Then I went into Richard's home office. He kept it locked, but I had the master key to every door in this house. I paid for the locks, after all. The room smelled of stale coffee and secrets. I sat at his massive mahogany desk, another gift from me, and booted up his desktop computer. Password protected. Of course. I tried his birthday. Incorrect. I tried our anniversary. Incorrect. I tried Monica. Incorrect. I paused, thinking. Richard was arrogant, but he was also sentimental about his triumphs. I typed in the due date of Monica's baby. Access granted. A shiver of revulsion went down my spine, but I ignored it. I plugged in the external hard drive Mr. Henderson had given me. While the data transferred, I started opening folders. The folder labeled Project Phoenix caught my eye. I clicked it. It wasn't a business plan. It was an exit strategy. There were PDFs of brochures for villas in Costa Rica. There were bank statements for an account I didn't know existed, an account under the name of a shell company called Phoenix Consulting. I opened the statements. My breath hitched. Transfer, $5,000. Consulting fee. Transfer, $12,000. Marketing services. Transfer, $25,000. Seed capital. I cross-referenced the dates with our joint checking account. Every time Richard had asked me for money for his startup costs or overhead, he had immediately funneled it into this private account. And the withdrawals, $1,500. Tiffany and Company, the bracelet I saw Monica wearing last week, $2,800. The Stork's Nest luxury baby gear, $3,200. Emerald City Obstetrics. He was funding her entire lifestyle and their future getaway with my money. The total amount siphoned over the last 2 years was nearly $280,000. But that wasn't the worst part. I found a digital folder labeled legal. Inside was a draft of a custody agreement for me. I opened it, confused. Why would there be a custody agreement? We didn't have children. I read the text, and the blood froze in my veins. It was a petition for involuntary commitment. Richard had been documenting evidence of my mental instability. He had notes about my mood swings from the hormones I took during IVF, my depression grieving my miscarriages, and my paranoia. Plan A. Divorce her after the trust fund clears. Plan B. If she fights the prenup, prove she is mentally incompetent to manage her estate. Have Richard appointed as conservator. He wasn't just going to leave me. If I fought back, he was planning to have me locked up and take control of my fortune that way. He wanted to pull a Britney Spears on me. I sat back in a leather chair, staring at the glowing screen. The cruelty was bottomless. This man, whom I had nursed through the flu, whose debts I had paid, whose ego I had stroked for a decade. He looked at me and saw nothing but an ATM machine he needed to hack. The hard drive beeped. Transfer complete. I pulled the drive out and slipped it into my purse. I shut down the computer. I wiped my fingerprints off the keyboard and the desk surface. I stood up and looked around the room. I wanted to smash everything. I wanted to take a golf club to his monitors. But I couldn't. Not yet. I needed the big money to drop. I needed them to think they had won. I walked out of the office and locked the door. My hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore. They were shaking with the adrenaline of the hunt. I went downstairs and poured myself a glass of wine. I sat in the dark living room and dialed my father. "Dad," I said when he picked up. "Laura, is everything okay? It's late." "No, Dad, everything is wrong. But I need you to listen to me, and I need you to not get angry. I need you to help me destroy him." There was a pause on the line. Then Arthur Reynolds' voice came through, low and dangerous as a growling tiger. "Tell me everything." My parents' estate was an hour away, a sprawling property on the waterfront that Richard always coveted. He used to walk the grounds and say, "One day this will be ours." I used to think he meant it as a shared legacy. Now I knew he meant it as a conquest. I sat in my father's study the next day. The room was lined with books and smelled of old paper and pipe tobacco. My mother, Catherine, sat next to me on the leather sofa, holding my hand. She hadn't said a word since I played the recording of the phone call and showed them the documents from the hard drive. She just held my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. My father stood by the window looking out at the gray ocean. He was 70 years old, but he still had the posture of a general. Involuntary commitment. He repeated the words, tasting like ash in his mouth. He was going to try to declare you insane. To get control of the assets if the divorce got messy, I said, my voice steady. He knew the prenup protects the principle of the trust, but not the income generated during the marriage. If he controls the accounts, I should kill him, my father said simply. He turned around, and his eyes were cold. I have friends, Laura. He could just disappear. No, I said. That's too easy. And I don't want you going to jail for a worm like him. I want him to suffer. I want him to think he's won the lottery and then realize the ticket is fake. I want him to be humiliated in front of everyone he tried to impress. And I want Monica to realize she bet on a losing horse. My mother finally spoke. The trust distribution, she said. That's what they are waiting for. The $5 million. Yes, I nodded. Next month, we stop it, my father said. I'll call the lawyers. We freeze everything. If we freeze it now, he'll know, I argued. He'll panic. He'll hide the assets he's already stolen, the $280,000. He'll delete the evidence. He'll spin the narrative that I'm the crazy one. I need to catch him in the act of trying to steal the big pot. My father sat down at his desk, steepling his fingers. So, you want to trap him? I want to dangle the carrot, I said. I want to make the carrot bigger. $5 million is good. But $10 million? $10 million makes people sloppy. My father smiled, a slow, predatory grin that I recognized from his business negotiation days. You want me to restructure the trust, or at least pretend to? Exactly, I said. Tell him you're so impressed with how he's handled whatever fake business he talks to you about that you want to move the asset sale. But to avoid taxes, we need to move it into a joint investment vehicle, something he has to sign for. A liability trap, my father mused. We set up a shell company. We make it look like an investment fund. We transfer assets into it. But actually, we transfer debt, or we make him sign a personal guarantee for a loan to buy into the fund. Make him sign a personal guarantee for a $10 million credit line, I suggested. Tell him it's to leverage the investment. He'll sign anything if he thinks he gets access to the cash. And once he signs that guarantee, my father continued, we call the loan. He'll be personally liable for $10 million he doesn't have. He'll be bankrupt, I said again. And this time, I won't be there to bail him out. My mother squeezed my hand. And the girl, Monica. She wants a baby shower, I said, my voice hardening. I'm going to give her one. That's where we drop the hammer. I want the papers served there. I want the revelation to happen there. My mother nodded. I'll handle the catering. We'll make sure it's an event to remember. We spent the next 3 hours mapping out the details. Project Green Inheritance was born. We drafted the fake legal documents. My father called his most vicious lawyer, a man named Sterling, who scared even me, to prepare the real divorce filing and the fraud lawsuit. When I left my parents' house that evening, I felt lighter than I had in years. The victim was gone. The architect of their destruction was driving the car. I texted Richard, "Great meeting with Dad. He wants to talk to you about a massive opportunity. Hurry home." I saw the 3 dots of his reply appear instantly. On my way. Love you. Love me? Right. He loved the smell of money, and he was about to catch a whiff of the biggest meal he'd ever choke on. That evening, I set the stage. I opened a bottle of vintage Cabernet, one Richard had been saving for a special occasion. I lit candles. I put on the jazz playlist he liked to pretend he understood. When he walked in, he looked flushed. He had probably driven 90 miles per hour to get here after my text. "Laura," he called out, dropping his keys. "What's all this celebration?" "I talked to Dad today," I said, handing him a glass of wine. I was wearing my best silk robe. I had to sell the fantasy. I really talked to him about us, about your potential. Richard's eyes widened. He took the glass, his fingers brushing mine. And he agrees with me, I said, leading him to the sofa. "He thinks it's been too hard on you. He thinks you're ready for the next level." I took a deep breath, channeling every ounce of acting skill I possessed. "Dad wants to liquidate the Blue Water Trust, the one with the $5 million. Richard nodded, trying to look calm, but I saw the pulse jumping in his neck. "Okay, and distribute it to you." "No," I said. "He wants to double it. He wants to combine it with his personal liquidity fund. $10 million, Richard. He wants to transfer it into a new management LLC. And he wants you to be the managing partner." Richard stopped breathing. I literally saw him stop breathing. 10 million. Control. Power. It was everything he had ever wanted. "Managing partner," he choked out. "Me?" "Yes," I beamed. "He says he's getting too old to micromanage these aggressive funds. He needs young blood. He wants to set it up next week." "But," I paused, looking worried. "But what?" Richard leaned forward, his hunger palpable. "He needs you to sign some heavy paperwork. Since you'd be the managing partner, you'd have to sign the liability waivers and the capital guarantees. It's standard stuff, Dad says, just to keep the IRS off our backs, but it puts you legally in charge." "I can handle it," Richard said immediately. He didn't even ask what a capital guarantee entailed. He just heard legally in charge. "I've handled complex deals before, Laura. You know that." "I know." I touched his cheek. I told him, "You're the smartest man I know. We're going to be so rich, Richard. We can finally buy that villa in Tuscany you always talk about. We can do anything." He grabbed me and kissed me. It was a passionate, fervent kiss. But it wasn't for me. It was for the $10 million. I kissed him back, thinking about how much I was going to enjoy watching him sign his life away. "I need to make a call," he said, pulling away abruptly. "Just checking on a client to clear my schedule for next week." "Go ahead, darling," I smiled. He practically ran into the hallway. I stayed on the sofa and quietly picked up the baby monitor receiver I had hidden under a stack of magazines. I had placed the transmitter in the hallway planter earlier that day. I put the receiver to my ear. "Monica, listen to me." Richard's voice was a frantic whisper. "We have to wait." "No, shut up and listen. It's 10 million. 10. Double the payout." Pause. Monica must have been screaming on the other end. I know you want to leave now," Richard hissed. "But can you imagine the difference between 5 and 10? We can live like royalty. We never have to work again. Just hold on. 2 more weeks. The paperwork gets signed next week. Once the funds hit the LLC, I wire it out and we are ghosts." Pause. "I love you, too. Look, buy yourself something nice. Buy that car you wanted. Put it on the emergency card. It doesn't matter anymore. We're going to be richer than God." He hung up. I set the receiver down. My hands were steady. He was going to wire the funds out. He thought he was going to empty the account. He didn't know that the account he would be given access to would be a restricted escrow account, and the wire transfer he attempted would trigger the immediate enforcement of the personal guarantee. He was going to attempt grand larceny, and in doing so, he would trigger a debt that would bury him. He walked back into the living room, a smile plastered on his face. "All sorted," he said. "My schedule is clear. I'm all yours." "To us," I said, raising my glass. "To us," he replied, clinking his glass against mine. "To me," I thought. "And to the hell I'm about to rain down on you." The week leading up to the signing was a masterclass in psychological torture. Richard was on his best behavior, playing the doting husband so intensely it was nauseating. But Monica was cracking. I invited them both to dinner at a high-end seafood restaurant downtown. I told them it was a pre-celebration for the big business deal. I wanted to see them in the same room. I wanted to see the tension. Monica arrived wearing a tight dress that accentuated her bump. She looked tired. Her ankles were swollen. Richard, meanwhile, was glowing, wearing a new suit he had undoubtedly bought with my money. "You look exhausted, Mon," I said as we sat down. "Doesn't she, Richard?" Richard barely glanced at her. He was too busy looking at the wine list. "She looks fine." "So, Laura, did your dad mention the notary date?" "Tuesday," I said. "But let's not talk business yet. Let's talk about the baby. Monica, you must be so excited." Monica glared at Richard. "I am, but it's hard doing it alone, you know, without a partner to help with the heavy lifting." It was a direct shot at Richard. "Well, you have us," I said, patting her hand. "Richard has been so helpful, haven't you, honey? He's been looking at nursery themes with me." Richard froze. He hadn't been looking at nursery themes with me. I was lying, but he couldn't deny it without looking like a bad husband in front of the money source. And he couldn't agree without pissing off Monica. "I just glanced at a few," Richard stammered. "He wants a jungle theme," I told Monica, "which is funny because I remember you saying you wanted a jungle theme for your baby. Isn't that a coincidence?" Monica's fork clattered onto her plate. She turned to Richard, her eyes blazing. "You're looking at nursery themes for her guest room." "It's just talk," Richard said quickly, sweating. "Laura, let's order. The lobster looks amazing." "I want the lobster," Monica said petulantly. "And the caviar." "Get whatever you want," I said. "It's on me." Throughout the dinner, I kept the spotlight on Richard's success and how much I relied on him. I talked about how we were planning a second honeymoon to the Maldives next month. "The Maldives?" Monica interrupted. "I thought you couldn't fly because of your blood pressure." I looked at her, confused. "My blood pressure is perfect. Why would you think that?" Monica looked at Richard. Richard looked at his plate. He had obviously told her the lie about my health to keep her hopeful that I might die soon. "Oh," Monica mumbled. "I must have misunderstood. Richard is taking me to the Maldives," I continued, twisting the knife. "It's going to be so romantic. Just the two of us reconnecting." I saw Monica reach under the table. A second later, Richard flinched and kicked his leg. She had kicked him. "Actually," Richard said, his voice high and tight. "Maybe we should wait on the trip, Laura, with the new business. I'll be very busy." "Nonsense," I said. "We can celebrate. Unless, is there a reason you can't go?" "No," Richard said miserably. "No reason." Monica suddenly stood up. "I need to go to the bathroom." She stormed off. "You should go check on her, Richard," I said innocently. "She seems hormonal. You're so good with people." I should stay here with you," he said. He was terrified to leave me alone, terrified I'd suspect something. He was prioritizing the money over his pregnant mistress. I watched him make that choice. He chose the 10 million over his unborn child and the woman he claimed to love. "Don't be silly," I said. "Go. I'll order dessert." He hesitated, then got up and walked toward the restrooms. I waited 5 seconds, then followed them. I didn't go into the bathroom. I stood in the corridor near the alcove where the payphones used to be. I heard hushed, angry whispering coming from the hallway near the emergency exit. "You are humiliating me," Monica hissed. "Talking about honeymoons, jungle themes. You're playing house with her while I'm carrying your kid." "Keep your voice down." Richard snapped. "Do you want to blow this? It's 10 million. Monica, For 10 million, I will dance a jig in a tutu if she asks me to. Just shut up and eat your lobster. In 2 weeks, she's history. I hate her, Monica sobbed. I hate her so much. She sits there so smug, throwing her money around. She's a fool, Richard said. She's a pathetic, lonely fool, and we are going to bleed her dry. Now, wipe your face and get back out there. We are almost at the finish line. I stepped back into the shadows as they composed themselves. Almost at the finish line, he said. He was right, but he didn't realize that the finish line was actually the edge of a cliff, and I was the one who had greased the edge. I went back to the table and sat down. When they returned, I was smiling. I ordered the chocolate lava cake, I said. It's going to be explosive. The dinner with Richard and Monica had confirmed their greed. But in the eyes of the law, greed isn't a crime. Adultery, however, in our state and under the ironclad terms of our prenuptial agreement, was a breach of contract that could strip Richard of any claim to spousal support. But I needed more than just a recording of a phone call, which a good lawyer could argue was obtained illegally or taken out of context. I needed biological proof. I needed to tie Richard to that baby with a knot so tight even Houdini couldn't slip out of it. I needed his DNA, and I needed hers. Richard was easy. I pulled hairs from his hairbrush every morning, just out of habit to keep the sink clean. But Monica was the challenge. 2 days after the dinner, I texted Monica, "Hey, I found some incredible vintage maternity clothes in the attic that my mom saved. Chanel, Dior, they would look amazing on you. Want me to drop them by?" The trap was baited with vanity. Monica couldn't resist high-end labels. She texted back immediately, "OMG, yes, I'm at the apartment. Come over." The apartment. The bachelorette pad she claimed she was renting with her savings. In reality, it was a $3,500 a month condo in Bellevue that Richard paid for using funds siphoned from my retirement account. I drove over with a garment bag full of clothes I had bought at a thrift store and dry cleaned to look expensive. When she opened the door, the smell of the place hit me. It smelled like him. His cologne was in the air. His shoes were by the door. It was a second home, a shadow life they were living right under my nose. "Laura." She hugged me, her eyes immediately darting to the garment bag. "You are a lifesaver. Nothing fits me anymore." "Happy to help," I smiled, stepping inside. "Can I use your restroom?" That coffee went right through me. "Sure. Down the hall," she said, already unzipping the bag to get to the Chanel. I walked into the bathroom. It was masterfully cluttered with her beauty products. And there, in a ceramic cup by the sink, were 2 toothbrushes, one pink, one blue. I pulled a Ziploc bag from my purse. I grabbed the blue toothbrush, Richard's. I knew the brand. He had sensitive gums. I bagged it. Then I grabbed a hairbrush full of long, blonde strands from the counter. Monica's. I bagged that, too. But I needed something directly linking the pregnancy to Richard. A toothbrush proves he sleeps here, not that he's the father. I opened the cabinet under the sink. Nothing but towels. I checked the small trash can in the corner. It was mostly tissues and makeup wipes. I dug a little deeper, ignoring the revulsion rising in my throat. And there it was, a crumpled piece of thermal paper. I smoothed it out. It was a receipt from the OB/GYN clinic from 3 days ago. Emerald City Obstetrics, patient, Monica Stevens, guarantor responsible party, Richard Vance. Service, 24-week ultrasound. He had signed for it. He had literally put his name on the financial responsibility form for the ultrasound. He was so arrogant, so sure I would never see this, that he didn't even use cash. I took a photo of the receipt and then slipped the original into my pocket. "Everything okay in there?" Monica called out. "Just washing my hands," I chirped. I flushed the toilet for effect and walked out. Monica was holding up a silk blouse against her chest in the hallway mirror. "This is gorgeous," she said. "Is it real vintage?" "It is," I lied. "It looks perfect on you. Wear it to the party." "I will," she beamed. "By the way, Richard said the business deal is happening Tuesday." He seemed stressed but excited. "He is," I said, walking to the door. "He's about to become a very powerful man. Monica, we should all be ready for changes." "I'm ready," she said, rubbing her belly. I was born ready. I drove straight to the private lab my lawyer, Sterling, had recommended. I handed over the Ziploc bags and the receipt. I need a rush on this, I told the technician. I need a paternity profile and a comparative analysis. I need to know that the DNA on this blue toothbrush matches the DNA of the father, and I need it to match my husband. We can have a preliminary match in 48 hours, the technician said. But for court admissible. I don't need it for court yet, I interrupted. I need it for video presentation. He looked at me, confused, but took the credit card. Driving home, I felt a strange sense of calm. The pieces were locking into place. I had the financial trap set with my father. I had the social trap set with the party. And now I had the biological trap. Richard came home that night, whistling. He kissed me on the cheek. Big day tomorrow with your dad, he said. I've been reviewing the prospectus. You're going to do great, I said, stroking his lapel. Just make sure you sign everything. Dad hates hesitation. I won't hesitate, Richard promised. He had no idea. He was about to sign his own death warrant, and he was whistling while he did it. Tuesday morning arrived with a gray, ominous sky, the kind of Seattle weather that usually made Richard complain about his joints. But today, he was electric. He spent an hour in front of the mirror adjusting his tie, checking his teeth. He looked like a man preparing to accept an Oscar. Do I look like a managing partner? He asked, turning to me. You look like a $10 million man, I said. It wasn't a lie. That was exactly the amount of debt he was about to incur. We drove to my father's office in the city. The Reynolds building was a steel and glass monolith that Richard always stared up at with envy. Today, he walked in like he owned it. My father, Arthur, was waiting for us in the boardroom. The table was long enough to land a plane on. Sitting next to him was a man Richard didn't know, Mr. Sterling, introduced simply as the family's legal consultant for the trust. Richard, my father said, standing up but not offering a hand. Good to see you, Arthur. Richard nodded, trying to match my father's gravitas. Ready to get to work. Excellent. Let's not waste time. My father slid a stack of documents across the polished mahogany. They were thick, bound in blue covers, looking every bit the official transfer of wealth Richard had dreamed of. As Laura explained, my father began, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. We are consolidating the Blue Water assets into a new entity, Vance Reynolds Capital, to avoid the gift tax and the inheritance delays. We are structuring this as a leveraged buy-in. Richard nodded sagely, but I could tell by the glaze in his eyes he didn't understand half of what Arthur was saying. He just heard Vance Reynolds Capital, his name. First, you will be the sole managing director, Sterling piped up, tapping the paper. This gives you unrestricted trading authority. However, to satisfy the SEC and the banking covenants, the director must personally guarantee the leverage line. It's a formality. The assets cover the loan 10 times over. Of course, Richard said, reaching for the silver pen. Standard procedure. Read it carefully, Richard, I said softly, feigning concern. It's a big commitment. He shot me a look that said, shut up. Let me handle this. I know what I'm doing, Laura. He flipped to the signature page. He didn't read the clause on page 42 that defined the assets as non-liquid and subject to a 5-year lockup. He didn't read the clause on page 50 that stated the leverage line was callable immediately upon any evidence of marital infidelity or misappropriation of funds. And he certainly didn't read the fine print that made the personal guarantee absolute, piercing the corporate veil, meaning they could come after his car, his clothes, and any future earnings. He signed his name with a flourish. Richard Vance. Done, he said, capping the pen. My father watched him, his face unreadable. Welcome to the deep end of the pool, Richard. When do the funds hit? Richard asked, his hands trembling slightly. The account is active as of now, Sterling said, checking his watch. You have trading power. Richard let out a breath he must have been holding for years. He looked at me, and for a second I saw the mask slip. It wasn't love in his eyes. It was triumph. He thought he had just stolen my family's legacy. We should celebrate, Richard said. Dinner, champagne. I have a better idea, I said. Let's save the big celebration for the baby shower on Saturday. It will be a double celebration. New life, new business, right? The baby shower. Sure, Richard said, distracted. He was already mentally spending the money. He stood up, shook my father's hand vigorously, and practically danced out of the room. When the door clicked shut, the silence in the room was heavy. My father looked at the document. He didn't even ask about the interest rate. He's a fool, Dad, I said, staring at the door. A greedy, desperate fool. He's legally hooked, Stalin confirmed, putting the papers in his briefcase. As soon as you file for divorce, and we prove the adultery, the bad boy clause in this contract triggers. We call the loan. He owes the holding company $10 million immediately. He'll be bankrupt by lunchtime. And the funds he thinks he has access to. I asked. Restricted escrow. Sterling smiled, a shark-like expression. He can see the money on a screen, but he can't move a cent out without a countersignature, which he won't get. I walked over to the window and looked down at the street. I saw Richard walking out of the building. He stopped on the sidewalk, pulled out his phone, and made a call. Even from 20 stories up, I knew who he was calling. Monica. He was telling her they were rich. Enjoy it, Richard, I whispered against the glass. You have exactly 4 days to feel like a king. The audacity of Monica Stevens knew no bounds. When she asked for the baby shower, I thought she meant a small gathering. But once she thought Richard had secured the $10 million, her demands spiraled into insanity. She didn't just want a party. She wanted a coronation. I want gold, she told me over coffee, showing me her Pinterest board. Gold balloons, gold tablecloths, gold dust on the cupcakes. I want to look like royalty. Gold it is, I said, writing it down in my notebook. Gold, like the money you think you're stealing. And the cake, she continued. I want a 3-tier cake. And for the reveal, I don't want just a balloon pop. That's so basic. I want a video, a montage of my journey, ending with the color reveal on a big screen. I looked up at her. She was practically handing me the weapon to kill her with. A video on a big screen, I repeated slowly. That is a brilliant idea, Monica. I can put that together for you. I have all those photos from our trips and the ones you sent me of the ultrasound. Yes, she clapped her hands. Use the ultrasound pics and put some emotional music behind it. Something like 1,000 years. I'll make sure it's very emotional, I promised. She wanted the party at my house. Of course, she did. She wanted to parade her fertility in the home of the barren woman she was betraying. She wanted to stand in my living room, surrounded by my friends, eating my food, and secretly laughing at me. Are you sure you're okay with this, Laura? She asked, putting on a fake pout. I know. You know, the baby stuff is hard for you. I'm over it, I said, sipping my tea. Really? I'm just happy for you and the father, whoever he is. Monica smirked. Oh, he'll be happy. Trust me. Saturday arrived. The gender reveal day. My house was transformed into a glittering palace of deception. Gold streamers hung from the chandeliers. A catering team, paid for by me, was setting up a buffet of lobster sliders and truffle fries. Richard was pacing the hallway, looking nervous. Is this too much? He asked, adjusting his tie. People might talk. Why are we doing this for your assistant? She's my best friend, Richard, I said, fixing his collar. And besides, we're celebrating us, too. Remember the deal? We can announce it to everyone tonight, right? He relaxed slightly. The deal. Guests started arriving at 2 p.m. It was a mix of Richard's business associates, who he wanted to impress with his new wealth, my family, who were all in on the plan, and Monica's friends, a gaggle of women who looked at me with pity, clearly knowing more than they should. Monica arrived in a white limousine. She stepped out wearing a gold sequin gown that hugged her bump. She looked like she was arriving at the Met Gala, not a backyard barbecue. Welcome to the party, she shouted, waving to everyone. She walked straight to Richard and gave him a hug that lasted 3 seconds too long. I watched from the balcony. The way she looked at him, it wasn't just love, it was ownership. She thought she owned him now. She thought she owned this house, this life. My mother walked up beside me. She was wearing black, like she was attending a funeral. In a way, she was. "Are you ready?" Mom asked. "I've been ready for a lifetime," I said. "The server is set up. The projector is focused. Dad has a security team on standby in the garage." "Good." I looked down at the crowd. Monica was holding court near the chocolate fountain, laughing loudly. Richard was holding a scotch, looking smugly at my father's business partners, probably bragging about his new managing director title. They were so high up. The fall was going to be breathtaking. "Laura." Monica waved at me from below. "Come down. It's time for the video." I smiled and waved back. "Coming." I walked into my bedroom and opened the safe. I took out the USB drive. It contained a file named monicorndesunderskajourney.mp4. But I had edited it. Oh, I had edited it beautifully. I checked my reflection. I wasn't the sad, infertile wife anymore. I was the karma they didn't believe in. I walked down the grand staircase, the USB drive warm in my hand. The crowd parted for me. I felt like a gladiator entering the arena. "All right, everyone," I announced, grabbing the microphone. "Gather round. Monica's been dreaming of this moment for months. She wants to show you all the truth about this miracle baby." Monica beamed, clutching Richard's arm. Richard looked uncomfortable but forced a smile. I plugged the USB into the laptop connected to the projector. The massive screen in the living room flickered to life. "Lights, please," I called out. The room went dark. The darkness in the room was heavy, filled with the hushed anticipation of 50 guests. The air smelled of expensive perfume and the ozone tang of a storm about to break. I stood by the projector, the hum of the cooling fan vibrating against my fingertips. I looked out at the faces illuminated by the ambient glow of the screen. There was Monica, standing front and center, her hands cradling her belly, her face turned upward in rapturous expectation. She expected a montage of ultrasound photos set to a sappy ballad, ending with a burst of blue or pink confetti. She expected validation. She expected to be the star. There was Richard, standing slightly behind her, shifting his weight from foot to foot. He was swirling the ice in his glass, his eyes darting around the room. He was trying to look casual, trying to maintain the distance of a supportive boss while secretly sharing the intimacy of a father. He had no idea that in his pocket, the phone he thought was secure had been cloned by my forensic team 3 days ago. There was my father, Arthur, standing by the patio doors. He wasn't looking at the screen. He was looking at Richard with the cold, dead stare of a sniper, waiting for the green light. Beside him, 2 men in dark suits, private security masquerading as caterers, stood with their hands clasped in front of them, ready to move. And there was me. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, but my hands were steady. This was the moment of no return. Once I pressed play, there was no going back to the polite fiction of my marriage. Once I pressed play, I would be a divorcee. I would be the woman who nuked her own life to kill the cancer growing inside it. But looking at them, the husband who called me barren and the best friend who stole my money to buy her maternity clothes, I didn't feel fear. I felt a righteous, burning clarity. I gripped the remote control. My thumb hovered over the enter button. Time seemed to slow down. I could hear the individual breaths of the people in the front row. I could hear the ice clinking in Richard's glass. I thought about the nursery I had never gotten to decorate. I thought about the nights I spent injecting hormones into my bruised stomach while Richard was working late with Monica. I thought about the check for $10 million Richard thought he controlled. "This is for you, Laura," I whispered to myself. The Laura who deserved better. I looked directly at Richard. For a split second, our eyes locked in the dim light. He frowned. He saw something in my face. Not the adoration he was used to, but a shark-like flatness. His smile faltered. He took a half step forward, his mouth opening to ask a question. "Laura," he mouthed. It was too late. I pressed the button. The screen flared to life, casting a harsh white light over Richard's terrified face. The silence in the room was about to be shattered forever. I stood there, the remote in my hand like a detonator, watching the fuse burn down to nothing. The video didn't start with music. It started with static. Then a date appeared in white text on a black background. October 14th, 5:42 p.m. The audio crackled to life. It was a recording from my car. The sound was crystal clear, amplified by the expensive surround sound system Richard had insisted we install. God, she is so suffocating. I almost slipped up and called her by your name. Richard's voice boomed through the living room. In the crowd, heads turned. People looked confused. They thought it was a joke or a skit. But Richard froze. His glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the marble floor, the sound sharp as a gunshot. You better not. I don't want my son confused about who his real family is. That was Monica's voice. On the screen, the static cut to a video clip. It was grainy, taken from a long-distance lens, but undeniable. It showed Richard and Monica at a park bench. Richard was kissing her stomach. A collective gasp went through the room. It sounded like all the oxygen had been sucked out at once. Monica let out a strangled sound, a high-pitched no. She turned to look at the projector, her face pale as death under the heavy makeup. The audio continued, relentless. Just wait until her father's check clears. 5 million, Monica. That's our ticket. We'll take the baby and leave her with nothing but her empty house and her dried-up womb. She's too old to give me a son anyway. She's barren. The room erupted. My mother's friends covered their mouths. Richard's business partners looked at him with absolute disgust. But I wasn't done. The video cut to a new image. It was a document. The PDF of the involuntary commitment petition Richard had drafted. The words mentally incompetent were highlighted in red, zooming in so everyone could read them. Then the coup de grace. The screen flashed to the DNA results I had received from the lab. Paternity test result. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. Father, Richard Vance. And finally, a slide I had made myself. A simple photo of the Project Green contract Richard had signed 2 days ago, with his signature blown up next to the clause, personal liability, $10 million. The video ended. The screen went black for 3 seconds. There was absolute silence. Then chaos. You bastard. Monica screamed. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at Richard. You said she didn't know. You said it was safe. Richard was shaking, his face a mask of terror. He looked at the crowd, then at me. He tried to laugh, a manic, broken sound. This is a deep fake. It's AI. Laura is sick. Save it. Richard, I said into the microphone. My voice was calm, booming over the whispers. The police are on their way. And so are your creditors. Creditors? Richard stammered, sweating profusely. What creditors? My father stepped out from the shadows. Me. You signed a personal guarantee for $10 million on Tuesday, Richard. And since you just admitted to conspiracy to commit fraud and theft on tape, I am calling the loan right now. Richard looked at my father, then at the contract that flashed on the screen in his mind. The color drained from his face completely. He realized the trap. No, he whispered. No, that was for the trust. There is no trust, I said, walking down the stairs. There never was. You signed a debt. Richard, you owe my family $10 million. And since we have a prenup that denies you everything in the event of adultery, you have no way to pay it. Monica grabbed Richard's arm, her nails digging into his suit. What does she mean? Where is the money? We need the money for the baby. Richard shoved her away hard. She stumbled back, almost falling into the dessert table. Get off me. Richard roared, losing all control. You stupid cow. You couldn't keep your mouth shut. You ruined everything. The crowd gasped again. This was the man who played the gentleman. Now he was a cornered rat attacking the pregnant woman he claimed to love. Get out, I commanded, pointing to the door. Both of you, get out of my house. Laura, please. Richard turned to me, his eyes wild, switching tactics instantly. He fell to his knees. Actually, dropped to his knees in the middle of the gold confetti. Laura, baby, listen. She trapped me. She seduced me. It was a mistake. I love you. I was just saying those things to keep her quiet until I could get rid of her. It was pathetic. It was revolting. You just tried to claim I was insane to steal my money, Richard. I looked down at him with pure contempt. You aren't a victim. You're a parasite. I nodded to the security guards. "Take the trash out," I said. The security guards, two hulking men who looked like they chewed glass for breakfast, moved in. One grabbed Richard by the arm, hauling him up from his knees like a rag doll. The other moved toward Monica. "Don't touch me," Monica shrieked, batting the guard's hand away. "I'm pregnant. You can't touch me." "Then walk," the guard said, his voice flat. The walk of shame was excruciatingly long. Richard tried to struggle, shouting about his rights, about his lawyer. "Call your lawyer," my father shouted after him, his voice booming. "He's already seen mine on Monday." As they were dragged toward the front door, the guests parted like the Red Sea. No one looked at them with sympathy. Even Monica's friends were filming on their phones, live-streaming the downfall of the woman who had bragged about her rich baby daddy for months. At the door, Richard grabbed the door frame, desperate. He looked back at me, tears streaming down his face. "Laura, think about what you're doing. We have 15 years. You can't just throw me away." "You threw us away the moment you decided my womb wasn't good enough," I said. "Goodbye, Richard." The guards shoved them out into the rain and slammed the heavy oak door. The sound echoed through the house, a finality that felt like a guillotine dropping. Silence returned to the room. The party was ruined. Obviously, the gold balloons looked tacky now. The cake was uncut. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, trembling, not from fear, but from the massive adrenaline dump leaving my body. My mother walked up to me and wrapped me in a hug. "It's over," she whispered. "You did it." "I'm sorry," I said to the guests, my voice shaking slightly. "There won't be a cake cutting. Please take the food home and thank you for coming to the show." Then something amazing happened. Mrs. Abernathy, the head of the charity board and the biggest gossip in town, started clapping. Slow, steady applause. Then my cousin joined in. Then Richard's former business partner. Soon the whole room was applauding. They weren't clapping for the drama. They were clapping for me. They were clapping for the woman who refused to be a victim. I let out a sob, a laugh mixed with tears. Outside, the drama wasn't over. Through the window, we could see flashing lights. My father had called the police not to arrest them for the fraud that would come later, but for trespassing and causing a disturbance, just to add to the humiliation. I watched through the sheer curtains. Richard was arguing with a police officer, gesturing wildly at the house. Monica was sitting on the curb in the rain, her gold dress soaked, crying into her hands. The Range Rover she thought she was getting was nowhere to be seen. Her beat-up Honda was still parked down the street. They were turning on each other. I could see Richard screaming at her, pointing a finger in her face. The love he spoke of on the phone had evaporated the second the money disappeared. That night, I slept in the guest room. I couldn't bear to sleep in the bed Richard had lied in. But for the first time in months, I slept without nightmares. The monster wasn't under the bed anymore. He was out in the cold where he belonged. The next morning, the real work began. Sterling arrived at 8 a.m. with a briefcase full of subpoenas. "We have the video," Sterling said, laying out the files on the kitchen table. "We have the signed guarantee. We have the DNA. We have the forensic accounting of the $280,000 he stole." "What's the first step?" I asked, pouring coffee. "We freeze his personal accounts," Sterling said. "Then we file the divorce petition citing adultery. Then your father files the lawsuit for the debt. We hit him from 3 sides at once. He won't be able to breathe." "Good," I said. "Suffocate him." I looked at the empty spot on the counter where Richard's espresso machine used to be. I had thrown it in the trash bin earlier that morning. "And Monica?" "A co-conspirator," Sterling said. "We can sue her for the return of the stolen funds, the jewelry, the medical bills, the rent. We can garnish her wages for the next 20 years. "Do it," I said. "I want every penny back. Not because I need the money, but because she needs to learn that nothing in life is free." The divorce proceedings were less of a battle and more of an execution. Richard tried to hire a high-profile lawyer, a man known for getting settlements for cheating husbands. But once the lawyer saw the Project Green contract and the personal guarantee for $10 million, he dropped Richard faster than a hot potato. Richard ended up with a strip mall attorney who looked like he slept in his car. We met for mediation in a glass-walled conference room 3 weeks later. Richard looked terrible. He had lost weight, his skin was gray, and he was wearing a suit that looked unpressed. He was living in a motel, according to the papers. When I walked in, he tried to make eye contact, to give me that sad puppy dog look that used to work. I looked right through him. My client, Sterling began, is offering nothing. Richard's lawyer sighed. Look, Mr. Vance is destitute. The debt to Vance Reynolds Capital is crushing him. He can't pay it. He's filing for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Bankruptcy won't clear the debt incurred through fraud, Sterling said cheerfully. We have evidence he signed that guarantee under false pretenses of managing a fund he intended to embezzle from. That's non-dischargeable. Richard slammed his hand on the table. I didn't embezzle anything. I never got the money. Because we stopped you, my father said from the corner of the room. Attempted grand larceny is still a crime, Richard. Richard slumped back in his chair. What do you want? He whispered. We want you to sign the divorce papers uncontested, Sterling said. You walk away with your personal effects, clothes, and shoes. No claim on the house, no claim on the retirement funds, no spousal support. And you agree to a repayment plan for the $280,000 you stole during the marriage. I can't pay that. Richard cried. I have a baby coming. Not my problem, I said. It was the first time I had spoken. He looked at me with hatred. You're heartless, Laura. You know that. You're a cold, heartless bitch. I learned from the best, I replied calmly. He signed. He had no choice. If he fought us, we would press criminal charges for the fraud and the wiretapping. He had recorded me without consent, as we found on his laptop. He left the meeting with a suitcase of clothes and a debt that would follow him for the rest of his life. The bankruptcy court took his car. They took his watch collection. They even took the golf clubs I had given him for his 40th birthday. As for the house, I hired a crew to strip it. I replaced the mattress. I repainted the walls. I burned the sheets. I wanted every trace of his DNA scrubbed from my sanctuary. One afternoon, I was overseeing the painters when my phone rang. It was an unknown number. Laura. It was Monica. Her voice sounded small, broken. What do you want, Monica? I need help. She sobbed. Richard left. He said he can't afford the baby. He said it's my fault he's broke. I'm due in 3 weeks, Laura. I have nowhere to go. My parents won't take me back. That sounds terrible, I said. Please, she begged. I know I messed up, but this is an innocent baby. Can you help me? Just alone? Or maybe I could stay in the guest house again. The audacity was breathtaking. She actually thought she could play on my sympathy one last time. Monica, I said, my voice hard as steel. You didn't just mess up. You plotted to destroy me. You mocked my inability to have children while carrying a child you planned to raise on my money. You aren't a friend. You're a predator who got caught. But the baby, there are plenty of adoption agencies and women's shelters, I said. I suggest you call one. Do not call me again. If you do, I'll file a restraining order. I hung up and blocked the number. I stood there in my empty hallway, listening to the silence. It wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. Karma, as it turns out, is a patient artist. She paints with slow, deliberate strokes. I didn't seek out news of Monica, but in a small social circle, gossip travels faster than light. 3 weeks after her desperate phone call, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Monica had gone into labor. It wasn't the royal birth she had envisioned. There was no private suite, no gold balloons, no videographer capturing the magic moment. She delivered at the county hospital, alone. Richard didn't show up. He was reportedly dodging process servers for another debt and living out of his car. The baby was a boy, a healthy baby boy. The son Richard had so desperately wanted to secure his legacy. But a legacy requires assets, and Richard had none. The reality of single motherhood hit Monica like a freight train. She couldn't afford the luxury condo anymore. She was evicted a month after the birth. She had to move back to her hometown in rural Ohio, moving into her parents' basement, the very fate she had mocked me for avoiding. She tried to sue Richard for child support. It was a comedy of errors. You can't squeeze blood from a stone. The court ordered Richard to pay $200 a month based on his minimum wage income at a hardware store, The only job he could get with a fraud flag on his background check. $200 a month. That wouldn't even cover the diapers she used to buy with my credit card. As for her career, dead. The industry we worked in was tight-knit. Everyone knew what she had done. I didn't even have to badmouth her. The video from the party had circulated quietly. No reputable charity or foundation would hire a woman known for embezzling from her benefactor. She was working as a waitress at a diner, I heard, serving coffee and eggs to truckers, with her Chanel clothes selling on eBay to pay for formula. Richard wasn't doing much better. The bankruptcy had cleared some of his debts, but the judgment for the stolen marital funds remained. My father's lawyers garnished his wages. Every paycheck he earned, we tipped 25%. He tried to contact me once, sending a letter to my lawyer. Laura, I'm changing. I'm going to church. I realize now that money isn't everything. I miss our talks. I burned the letter without reading past the first paragraph. He didn't miss our talks. He missed the lifestyle I provided. He was a man who had flown first class and drunk $500 wine, now scanning groceries and living in a studio apartment that smelled of mildew. One rainy Tuesday, a year after the discovery, I was stopped at a red light downtown. I looked out the window and saw a man walking in the rain without an umbrella. He was hunched over, wearing a cheap, ill-fitting jacket. It was Richard. He looked 10 years older. His hair was thinning. The arrogant strut was gone, replaced by the shuffle of the defeated. He was waiting for the bus. The Richard the first knew wouldn't be caught dead on a bus. The light turned green. I didn't honk. I didn't roll down the window to shout an insult. I just pressed the accelerator of my Mercedes and drove past him. He didn't see me. He was too busy looking at his shoes. That was the moment I knew I had truly won. Not because he was miserable, but because I felt absolutely nothing seeing him. No anger, no sadness, just indifference. He was a stranger, a cautionary tale in a wet jacket. And Monica, I checked her Facebook profile once. A moment of weakness. It was a stream of complaints. So tired. Why don't men step up? Need a babysitter who works for cheap. There were photos of the baby. He looked like Richard. Poor kid. I hoped he would grow up to be better than his parents, but the odds were stacked against him. I closed the laptop. Their story was over in my book. They were just footnotes now, ugly, messy footnotes in the chapter before my real life began. They say the best revenge is living well. But I think the best revenge is rediscovering who you were before the vampires drained you. I sold the house, the colonial mansion with the gold streamers and the bad memories. It was too big for one person. I didn't want to walk past the guest room where Monica had slept or the kitchen where Richard had cooked his guilt steaks. I bought a modern, glass-walled house overlooking the Sound. It was full of light, clean lines, no dark corners for secrets to hide. I started a new foundation. This one focused on financial literacy for women. I wanted to teach women how to protect their assets, how to spot financial abuse, how to ensure that no man could ever do to them what Richard tried to do to me. I called it the Phoenix Fund, a little inside joke for myself, reclaiming the name Richard had used for his shell company. My parents were my rock. My father, the tough-as-nails businessman, softened in the aftermath. We spent weekends gardening together. He never said, "I told you so." He just said, "I'm proud of you." And the baby issue, the dried-up womb comment that had haunted me, I went to therapy, a lot of therapy. I unpacked the shame I had carried for not being able to conceive. I realized that my value wasn't located in my uterus. I had so much love to give, and there were so many ways to give it. I became a court-appointed special advocate, CASA, for children in the foster system. I used my resources to help kids who had been abandoned by parents like Richard and Monica. One afternoon, I was at a fundraiser for the new foundation. I was wearing a red dress, a color I never wore with Richard because he said it was too aggressive. I felt powerful. A man approached me. He was older, distinguished, with kind eyes. "Laura Reynolds?" he asked. "I'm David. I've heard a lot about your work with the foster program." We talked. Not about money or business deals or status. We talked about books. We talked about the ocean. He didn't scan the room looking for someone more important to talk to. He looked at me. He didn't know about my money. He didn't know about the scandal. He He just saw a woman in a red dress who spoke with passion. "Would you like to get coffee sometime?" he asked. My instinct, the instinct Richard had instilled in me, was to say no, to protect myself, to assume everyone wanted something. But then I remembered the woman who drove past Richard at the bus stop. That woman wasn't afraid anymore. "I'd love to," I said. We took it slow. There were no grand gestures, no love bombing, just quiet dinners and long walks. He had his own life, his own career as a pediatrician. He didn't need my money. He insisted on splitting the bill. One night, 6 months later, we were sitting on my deck watching the sunset. "You seem happy," David said. "I am," I realized. "I really am." I thought about the timeline. 2 years ago, I was sitting in a car on the side of the highway, listening to my life implode. I thought it was the end of the world. But it wasn't the end. It was a forest fire. It burned everything down. The dead wood, the weeds, the rot. And in the ashes, something new had grown. Something stronger. I wasn't a barren wife or a cash cow. I was Laura, and Laura was doing just fine. It has been 2 years since the gender reveal party from hell. People still talk about it in our town. It's become a bit of a local legend. The night the Reynolds heiress dropped the MIC on her cheating husband. I don't mind the whispers anymore. In fact, I wear them like a badge of honor. I received a notification from the court last week. Richard's probation for the wiretapping charge is over, but he's still paying off the debt. He will be paying it off until he's 90. I donate every single check I receive from his garnished wages to a charity that provides diapers to single mothers. I think the irony would kill him if he knew. Monica is still in Ohio. I heard she got married to a guy she met at the diner. I hope he treats her better than Richard did. And I hope she treats him better than she treated me. I don't wish her harm anymore. Her life is small, and for someone like Monica who craved grandeur, that is punishment enough. As for me, I'm sitting on the beach as I record this. David is down by the water teaching a little boy how to skip stones. That little boy is Leo. He's 5 years old. I didn't give birth to him. I met him through my advocacy work. He had been bounced around 3 foster homes. His eyes were sad and weary, just like mine were after the divorce. I decided to foster him, and last month the adoption was finalized. Richard was right about one thing. I couldn't give him a son, but he was wrong about everything else. I didn't need to give birth to be a mother. I needed to open my heart. Leo looks up at David and laughs. A pure, unburdened sound. My heart swells so big I think it might burst. This is the family I was fighting for. It didn't look the way I thought it would. It wasn't built on genetics or legacy or $10 million trust funds. It was built on showing up. It was built on trust. I pick up a stone and rub it with my thumb. It's smooth, worn down by the ocean, just like me. I want to tell you, if you are listening to this and you feel trapped, if you are sitting in your car suspecting the worst, or if you are lying in bed next to a stranger who used to be your husband, I want you to know that the explosion isn't the end. The explosion is the exit door. Walk through it. Let it burn. Let the truth destroy the lie you've been living in. It will hurt. God, it will hurt. You will feel like you are dying. But you aren't dying. You are waking up. And on the other side, the air is clean. The light is real. And you are free. Thank you for listening to my story. Have you ever had to walk through your own kind of fire? How did you come out on the other side? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below.